This is Middle Class Matt from don'tbuythehype.blogspot.com, and I am Sports Genius. Watching HBO Hard Knocks, some of the best drama for men on television. The best reality show on television, and you would think almost there isn't such thing. Like, how could there be a good reality show? They're all bad. But this one's a good one. Enjoyed watching it. It's always very interesting. I'm learning a lot about the Miami Dolphins. I have not solved the riddle of why players are running away from the Dolphins. They do have problems, but not problems that I haven't seen in other organizations. So I'm going to be interested. I'm still trying to get a feel for the management. And they've shown the general manager, but I haven't got a real good look at the owner, the manager, the executive team, the front office, if you will. But I do have one thing that's sad for Dolphin fans out there watching this, and I think they're aware of this even if they won't be honest with themselves. The Dolphins aren't going to be very good this year. They have lots of problems and lots of things to work for. The old saying goes, when you're trying to rebuild a franchise, when you're trying to, undo a culture, is that how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And that's what they're going to have to do. Joe Philbin is the coach, and he has quite the task ahead of him. Now, last video talked about Hard Knocks, and I complimented his demeanor. And it is the demeanor of a lot of the great coaches. They're disciplinarians, like he showed to be in this episode. I'll talk about that later. But he's kind of boring, rigid, wants to do things by the book. These guys are successful. Those are the guys that are successful, but they don't have the charisma that a lot of people have, and the fire and the hype to get people hyped up. And my blog is called "Don't Buy the Hype," and a lot of people do buy the hype. But when you don't have that, what you have to be is smarter than everybody. You have to be harder working than everybody. And it's going to be interesting to see that, because there's a lot of guys like him that just go right back to being coordinators, and that's a possibility. But the Dolphins have some good players. They have Reggie Bush, who is a puzzle to me. This is one puzzle to me. That is somebody who the tabloids love, with Kardashian and all that junk. He's been absent from the show. I mean, you see him and he's out there, but they have not done. I wonder if they're like saving that for later episodes, because they have not done a lot with Reggie Bush. That surprises me. I thought this would be the Reggie Bush, Chad Johnson show. Has been the Chad Johnson show, but not the Reggie Bush. But let's get to Chad Johnson. First of all, he wasn't looking good out there. Sean Smith, the corner, who looks like a stud, man. 6'3", 6'4". I've seen it. I researched. He was labeled at both heights, but 6'3" by most. 220 pounds, fast, just dominating Chad Johnson, and couldn't get anything. He's bigger than him. He's clearly taller than him, bigger than him, and now that Chad Johnson is older, he struggled, could not get anything. And then he goes out there and they throw a ball to him in preseason and misses it right through his hands. I've known older athletes, guys in their 40s and 50s that really were good athletes and played in college, and I knew the way they talked, and they talked about, man, back in the day, I was the man. I could score 40 points, and they would get all, talking about what they used to be able to do. And that's what Chad Johnson reminds me of. He reminds me of a guy who talks like a has-been. He's got the big talk, the big swagger, and doesn't have the ability to back it up anymore. He's also shown that he's erratic, can't check his emotions, fires off cuss words, gets all bent out of shape in the press conferences, always trying to entertain, can't resist the spotlight. He just doesn't seem to be in control of himself. And the coach, Joe Philbin, he was on that right off the bat. I mean, he saw that. Here's a disciplined, sort of military-type personality. He was on that. And he didn't like it from the beginning. And this incident with him headbutting his wife, I mean, that was just, it made it an easy decision for him. He's gone. I think it probably, when he heard that it happened, and he said, so he definitely did it. This is the way I think the conversation went. So he definitely headbutted his wife? Yeah. He's gone. I mean, I think it was that simple. It just made it easy for him. The conversation they had one-on-one was one of the most uncomfortable moments I've ever seen in television. I mean, it is uncomfortable. you could just cut the tension with a knife. I was extremely uncomfortable to watch what was going on that you knew was going to happen. But I just think, now Chad hasn't ever had any problems off the field, but that wasn't the bigger thing. That just made it easy for the coach to do it. He didn't like it because he wants to run a disciplined organization, one that functions and moves like a locomotive. And Chad moves like this. All over the board. He's all over the board. And so he just wasn't gonna allow that. Now, I think it's interesting that HBO almost on purpose drew a comparison to guys that were, catching the ball in similar positions. One was a tight end, one's a receiver. And these were two model citizens. One of them they called 7-Eleven. Chris Hogan, I think his name was. Always open, 7-Eleven. Seems to be doing everything right. And then there's Les Brown, who's there before practice, doing everything he's supposed to do, beats the cameras in there. They said, you're here early because Hard Knocks is here. He said, I beat the cameras in here. Working hard to do everything. Those guys may not have, the tight end doesn't have the skills. And then, the other guy's in the same boat. But they may not have this sort of ability that a Chad Johnson has. But what they do is have work ethic, and these guys aren't going to get in trouble. They're not going to get those DUIs. And in the NFL, where it's full of guys getting in off the field trouble, these are the kind of guys you want. And so it's funny because those are the kind of guys that the coach has to reluctantly cut. He may have to cut them. But Chad Johnson, with the ability, the coach wanted to get rid of him because he was a cancer in the organization. And I don't know that Chad Johnson gets another shot. He might. But if he gets one more, that's it. If he messes his next one up, he's not in the NFL anymore. There's lots of guys that play and do well, and then all of a sudden they're gone. 32, 33 years old, had trouble, gone. So, the last thing I'll talk about, because that was probably the most interesting part of the show, is that Ryan Tannehill, I talked about this in the first video I did. You can watch that one about Hard Knocks. And that is that he seems to have all the tools to be a good quarterback. And he looked good out there. He looked real good out there. So it's going to be interesting to see how it develops. And I know Dolphin fans are probably pulling for him to play. And now that David Garrard is out with that injury, and he could be getting cut. A lot of times those old guys, when they get injured, now he might play, they still may bring him in, but a lot of those guys, when they start getting injured, those old guys, they'll just cut them. Especially when you already have a veteran and more. But Tannehill's the guy I think the coaches are pulling for. It's going to be interesting. So I'll see you after the next Hard Knocks. This is Middle Class Matt from Don't Buy the Hype.